So what are the best ways to find those different opportunities? I mean, how do you go about? I mean, we are in multifamily. I primarily invest in multifamily, and I invest in assisted living, and I'm an active operator. But I would like to know, I mean, you being a passive investor in a way, how do you go about vetting all that? I mean, it's a lot of information. Help me understand that a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. So the challenge for sure is finding opportunities. And there's two reasons. One is that you have to be an accredited investor to get access to all the opportunity or most of the opportunities. If you're not an accredited investor, it makes it significantly more challenging. You can only invest in a fraction of the opportunity. So that's number one. That's an important point. Number two is I get to network full time to find opportunities. And I've also built networks that have then provided me with a lot of deal flow. So I put a lot of time into building networks over time. I also went in person to many, many meetings when I was much younger here in Los Angeles. And so it was a question of building a network over time. And now, if you want to go directly to be able to invest with sponsors directly, that's what you have to do. If you are in the corporate world very busy and don't have the time or the interest to network, then you can access opportunities in other ways, but are typically going to be through intermediaries where the risk is the same, but the return is a little bit lower, right? Because someone's in the middle, which is fine. I mean, there's a lot of value to that for some people. That could be accessed through crowdfunding sites, through investor groups who actually find and vet opportunities. And those are probably the two primary ways. As far as finding sponsors directly, a lot of people like to listen to podcasts and then vet some sponsors by listening to them. I'm a huge fan of going to large conferences because that's a very efficient use of time to meet hundreds or more than 1,000 people sometimes. And there's also online forums and some online websites that are actually online forums of discussing opportunities where you can be amongst other investors in an accredited investor environment and to see what people are posting about opportunities they're looking at and find sponsors that way as well. But there is a lot of networking and a lot of work that goes into this. And if you're not interested in it, it's still definitely feasible, but then you're trading off a little bit of return for an intermediary.
Awesome. I think what you said, and I like that, going to these conferences, you could meet like hundreds and thousands of people, different operators and talk to them. If you have to do it yourself, one by one, in a forum or online, you're going to be spending a lot of time. So I kind of agree to you that your favorite mechanism is to go to these conferences.
Yeah, I just think it's really efficient. Another thing that was very beneficial to me, but most people don't have the time or interest to do probably, is I started my own investor groups here in LA with no sales pitch and met a lot of people, hundreds and thousands of people that way. I actually co-organize a conference and I meet a lot of people that way. But those are, I understand, like difficult initiatives for someone who's already working, right? I actually started those in-person investor meetings in Los Angeles after I finished working. That's what I did. The first thing I did with the extra time. So, but networking is a key component to this. And if you're not interested in networking and don't have the time, you definitely have to take a different approach.
Yeah. So what were the challenges that you faced, if any, during your early stages of your real estate investment journey? And how did you overcome them, if at all?
Absolutely. So when I first started, I not only had those challenges, but I was actually new to the US. I'm from Montreal, Canada. That's where I've lived half my life. I grew up there. And then I came out here, did an MBA over at UPenn or Wharton. And then I started working in Los Angeles in the year 2000. And in 2002 is when I actually started looking into all this type of investing. And the biggest challenge I had at the time in the US is because I hadn't built a big network here, I didn't know who to trust, right? Because you're trusting someone with your money, you're giving them control over the major decisions and the daily operations. So what I did to resolve that is I actually was very lucky. I had lifelong friends in my family out of Montreal who had actually been a sponsor, or at least they've been a sponsor for, at that point, probably 10 to 15 years. And so I started with them, even though it was a different currency, different country. And I knew the country well, but there was a currency exchange risk and everything, because I knew if I start with them, I'd be able to learn. So I kind of leveraged that situation to learn a lot from them on the ground, site visits, a lot of conversations, looking at pro formas. And that actually started in the asset classes of retail, office, and industrial, because that's what they were focused on. But that's okay, because I feel like almost any asset class, 80% of what you learn is the fundamentals, and you could transfer 80% to like the next asset class. So I was very lucky because I was in a position I knew that I could trust them and I knew I could learn from them. And that's how I started. And then what I did is I layered in going to a lot of in-person meetings. Now, those have become less common because there's virtual meetings and conferences, all these things and online that didn't exist when I started in 2002. But I didn't have kids at the time, and I took advantage of that and I put the time and work into it, especially with the traffic in LA after work. I went to about 2 to 3 meetings a week for years. And that's actually why I was motivated to start the nonprofit as soon as I left the corporate world, because of the fact that a lot of those meetings are sales pitches. And that sometimes you have to sit through an entire sales pitch just to network with a really big group of people in the end, which is worth it at times, right? So a lot of the meetings, I would sit in the back row of the meeting, not pay any attention. I literally bring my work, not listen to the meeting, do my work in the back row for like 2 hours. And then at the end, I would network with people. So I did a lot of in-person meetings and networking to build a network and then start to like look at other asset classes, learn about them in some of the meetings and start to like build a network of finding opportunities.
That's very inspiring. I mean, 15, 20 years ago, there was no online stuff. The Zoom thing started popping up in last 4 or 5 years only.
Yep. There's no online. Yeah, there was no online, no podcast, no conferences, no crowdfunding websites, right? No online, no apps, obviously. It was a totally different world. And frankly, it was much more difficult.
And I must tell you, even though we have a lot of online stuff nowadays, we can do a lot of things online quickly. I must tell you that most of my investors, whom I connect, with whom I have shaken a hand, most of the folks have, I would say 75% of my investors are those whom I have shaken a hand, not just meeting online. I mean,
yeah.
I think in terms of the time value of money, I get more bang for my efforts, when I raise equity for projects, when I have gone and met the people and have looked into eye-to-eye contact, and shaken hand and talk to them for 15, 20 minutes rather than just talking online. What is your take on this?
Well, it's funny you should ask because to be totally honest with you, like I've attended some conferences virtually as a panelist or a speaker. Like I'm actually speaking one tomorrow, but virtual. And I've also tried some of the online networking after the end of those sessions. And there is networking, but it's not the same. It's not even close to the same. You just don't get the same sense for the character of a person, which I think is very important before you invest with them if you can. You also, there's a lot of cool software that enables the networking, but it's not perfect. And being in a circle of say like, in person of 4, 5, 6, 7 people where you can learn a lot and talk right there, very difficult to do online. It's usually a one-on-one conversation. So there is networking online. It's not like there isn't, and there is value to it, but I think that it's a better version in person.
Oh, yeah, that is 100% true. I mean, if you are 7 of you standing in a circle, you can talk to almost 7 of them at the same time.
Yes. Yeah, and sometimes you get the benefit of standing with someone who's very knowledgeable, listening. Everyone's listening to this person, and you cannot do that in the virtual networking. It's very difficult. So again, this goes back to also like, does the person have time to network? Are they too busy? Are they too busy in their job? And some people really don't like networking and don't have the interest in doing it, in which case you could take the other path of going through the intermediaries and finding opportunities still.